come out and really expose the whole thing. He began to pull the first string on the sweater. And now the sweater is a pile of string on the floor. We've been proven right, but it's like, oh, we've moved into the future. Let's just forget that. But the future's now. We're living the context of this. And how deep does this deep state alliance with Saudi Arabian Wahhabist Islam go? A place where he lived for many years there in Saudi Arabia. So long intro. Get the book, J. Michael Springman, An Insider's View, Visas for Al-Qaeda, CIA hideouts that rocked the world, now more important than ever. Thanks for coming on, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
That was a long kind of 6-minute intro history for listeners. I mean, do you agree, disagree? I mean, where do we start here?
Well, it starts in a couple of different places. Going back to the book, it showed how the U.S. government was working with the terrorists, essentially recruiting, training, and supporting them in conjunction with the repressive and rather repulsive allies we've got in the region, like Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states and Israel and Turkey. And we kept pumping money and weapons and supplies into these people. And at the same time, we're fighting them, saying, oh, my God, we have these terrorists. They're everywhere. We have to fight them tooth and nail. And Obama gives them ground-to-air missiles. He gives them leftover weapons from the Yugoslav war in Croatia. It's astonishing. And now they're saying, oh, this is terrible. We have to do something about it. Well, what you do about it is simply stop supporting the terrorists. Don't give them weapons. Don't give them money. Don't let them go to Israel for medical treatment after they've been wounded in Syria. It's a simple way of stopping this, but the attention gets focused on the wrong things, I think. Trump started out very well, making statements about one-sided trade deals, making statements about the flood of illegal aliens coming into the United States. But he went off the rails with this ban on visas or people or permanent residents or anybody who's been traveling in any of these countries, no matter what their nationality is, and creating a tremendous uproar in the United States and around the world. And it turns out that these 7 countries essentially were the same ones that were targeted by the United States back in 2001. Wesley Clark, the retired general, was on Democracy Now! In, I guess, maybe March of 2007. And he had said he had been at the Pentagon in 2001 in September and October, and had been told by high officials whom he wouldn't name that the United States was going to move against 7 countries in 5 years and destroy them. And these were the same countries, with the exception of Lebanon and the addition of Yemen, that Donald Trump has banned from entry to the United States. And I think this goes back a long way to the American hostility toward the Arab and Muslim world, moving only into the country when it seems to be to America's advantage. What's happened is we've destroyed Afghanistan, we've destroyed Iraq, we've destroyed Yugoslavia, we've destroyed Libya, we've destroyed Syria, and we're in the process of destroying Yemen with our wonderful Saudi friends. And what's happened is that we have driven hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people into Europe. The country, or the continent, is flooded with people who have been driven out of their homes, out of the countries that we've destabilized, we've dehoused them, and we've deculturized them, blowing up things like the statues in Afghanistan or Tedmur in Syria. And, we've destroyed them. And the people have no homes, they have no country. And with American help, money under the table, assistance from passports that have been produced either by the French or the Qataris, or sold by the Syrian embassy in Berlin, or which have been lost or thrown away or stolen along the way. We've got people without a home moving into Europe, where they have no culture, no language facility, and no education. And the continent is coming apart. And we don't look to see what's happening. We have George Soros and some of these other people who say, oh, yes, we want to help them. We want to set up cell phone charging stations. We want to set up Wi-Fi networks in the Balkans, their main transit route into Europe. And therefore, we have to help these poor people because just like in the United States with the flood of illegal aliens from American destruction of governments in Latin America, we've overthrown...
Sure, so the globalists, I mean, you're crystallizing this also perfectly. The globalist policies through the United States as well ruins these countries. They're falling apart. Then they flood here. Then they're exploited politically for control here. It's just a totally, 360 full spectrum dominant system. But I love how you brought up the key points that Europe lets the jihadis that leave Europe to go fight in Syria come back and get medical treatment. Sweden in places have social worker programs to quote, reincorporate them as if you're going to let an Al-Qaeda or ISIS fighter come back and go to a Swedish, a re-education system, to play with Play-Doh and crap. I mean, this just shows how totally infiltrated we are and how the UN refugee program certifies through the State Department who's allowed to come in. Trump's saying we're not going to do that anymore. So from the info I have, the State Department is in open revolt, ignoring him and Tillerson, letting these people still flood in. So if that's correct, then what happens when there are other Islamic attacks?